everybody, and welcome to Chef Comp Online 2021. My name is Kaya Tolliver. I'm a developer advocate here at Progress, and I'm here with Dan Webb, sous chef contributor, and also Dev Relish chef, and Jason Field, ECS delivery consultant and sous chef board member, as well as OSS enthusiast. Today, Dan and Jason are going to give us a rundown of what's been up in sous chef land lately with the Sous Chef Yearly State of the Union. I know we're all excited to hear what they've been cooking up. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin the session. Please be sure to mute yourselves during the presentation. You can feel free to put questions in the chat and they will be answered during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. All right, take it away, guys.
Hey, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, wherever you are in the world. I feel like I've given this presentation enough times now that I have no idea where to start. So this year, we're going to go through how we automated the release cycle. We've got a ton of cookbooks and we've got even more this year. So it's a real nice little tidbits about how we've done that. Again, I'll just go over what Kaya said there, if my presentations will allow me to click. So yeah, I'm Dan Webb. I am a long-time sous chef collaborator. I used to be on the board probably 2 or 3 years ago. I've been around sous chefs for probably 5 or 6 years, and I dragged Jason in with the lure of interesting problems. Turns out there are a ton of interesting problems in this, and this is the big one that's really hit us in the past few years, and it's sort of cracked it, which is really nice. I'm also recently a senior developer advocate at Chef/Progress. And Jason, I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Dan. So I'm Jason Field. I'm a board member in Sous Chefs. Yes, that sounds like a fancy title. What it means is I get to do more paperwork and admin than anyone else, and let other people do development. It's really great fun. Heavily recommend spending your life in paperwork. I'm also currently working in ECS as an SRE practice lead and sort of just enjoy open source. As you can see on my GitHub, I happen to basically live it and not have much else to do in the evenings, as Dan would always point out to me.
Yeah, it's always nice when you get a pull request at midnight and you're like, Jason, go to sleep.
Yeah. Anyway, let's start off a bit about who are sous chefs. So basically, we are an open source group who have been maintaining quality chef cookbooks for a number of years now. Majority of us also do it partly as part of work, but some of us also do it in our spare time. I think Dan's got the best story, which is the MongoDB cookbook here.
Yeah, so the idea behind Sous Chefs created probably, I'm going to say 7 years ago. The MongoDB cookbook, as with a lot of cookbooks and a lot of pieces of software, there's a huge amount of effort went into the MongoDB cookbook, and then the maintainer decided that they couldn't maintain it. They weren't interested in doing any chef stuff anymore, any cookbook development anymore, and it just kind of died a death. And people were like, we really need the MongoDB cookbook, and there's 50 open pull requests, and we want to be able to still contribute even though the maintainer goes away. So what we did is we started around this idea the MongoDB cookbook needed to be saved. Basically, we took ownership of that. It used to be the SC MongoDB cookbook. We've now fully got the namespace, which is pretty nice. But we basically took the MongoDB cookbook and fixed it. But we did this via the whole community doing this. We had a few stewards kind of like sit there and be like, yeah, we'll enable you to release really quickly and we'll do the releasing, whereas you can just submit the code and we'll do that. Because there was more than one of us, it shared the burden. And if any one of those people left, the cookbook didn't die with that person, which is not a chef specific problem. But we saw it happen a few times with these chef cookbooks. So we thought, well, we'll do something about this. And that was 7 years ago, almost probably.
So on to the main point of today's talk. The first part I'd like to go through is what is TOIL for those who aren't aware. So TOIL is part of the site reliability practice. So we've got Google's definition on the screen. I'm not going to sit here and read it. I'm going to say my definition, which is basically, to me, TOIL is that kind of work where you keep having to do it and it just means that it keeps piling up. So for example, I always like to talk about a service. I've got a service on a VM somewhere and it keeps crashing. So maybe I've got a playbook which says I need to connect onto the server, I need to start the service. So the first thing I'd do as a DevOps is or from a DevOps perspective, is I'd probably write a script to start the service. And I'd also then go and set the script that if it's had to start the service 3 times in a minute or through some arbitrary numbers, alert a human because there's something really wrong compared to just regularly wrong. But where 12 goes further than that is it says to go and fix the source of the problem. So while that starting with the service script is a tactical fix, to me, where I'd want to go is I'd want to go and speak to the developers and get the service fixed so it actually stays running and remove that tactical fix. To me, I want to fix things with long-term enduring value, not just short-term quick wins that, unfortunately, I'm sure we've all seen become production code and sit there for a little while, should we say.
We've seen your production code, or I have anyway. So what does toil look like at sous chefs? We've got, as I kind of alluded to, we've got a ton of cookbooks this year, and we regularly adopt new cookbooks. So we've got a lot of little things to maintaining cookbooks, and then we've got a lot of new cookbooks that are onboarded. So you've got two problems there. So one is the ongoing maintenance, and one is bringing things up to our standards. And how do we get the files that really belong in there? And we'll talk about both of those things separately later on. But as a result of these two things, we've got a bit of automation in Zoramabot, which has done 1,713 pull requests. As we last checked, I'm gonna guess we've done more since last Tuesday because it's relentless. And the things that we need to go and do is accept those pull requests and say, yes, I trust that my piece of automation has found the things that are wrong with it. So one of those things is cook style, and we'll again talk about that later on. Like, it will find bits of cook style problems and say, hey, I found these things. Here are the changes I'm going to make, and I've ran them, and it will then run the pull request run the test against the new pull request and that kind of stuff. So it's automated all of the little horrible things that we don't want to do on a regular basis. And when we're managing 150 plus cookbooks, it gets a bit exhausting. But yeah, so this year we've adopted things from Chef cookbooks, Chef Windows cookbooks. So you'll see things like the Kubernetes cookbook, the 7-zip cookbook, Red Guide. So we've got the JavaScript cookbook now, and the community. So one of the things I popped across, and I think all of these people have sort of seen the value of sous chefs. They said, oh, well, we can see that sous chefs have been releasing really quickly. I'm going to pop them across my cookbook across there. I can still contribute, but I don't need to worry about the release story because they've got it sorted, which is really nice to see, actually. That's what I did anyway. I haven't released one of my cookbooks in probably 3 years, and then realized that none of my tests ran anymore. Way to fix that is I just chucked it across the sous chefs and then fixed it myself, which is really nice. And Zoramabot now runs it in and does all the toil stuff. I don't have to worry about any of the things around 12 for myself. I can't remember. It's the Winlog Beats cookbook that I've moved across. And one of those ongoing maintenance things of every year is, well, there's usually a deprecation or something that happens every year with major releases of Chef, hence why they're major releases. And again, this will probably come up a few times of major releases mean usually a little bit of deprecations and this kind of thing. So this year we've moved across to supporting unified mode, and that's required. Chef 17. I go on about that a little bit more in my custom resources webinar. But basically, the long and the short of it is Chef 15.3 is required to run any of our cookbooks that are well maintained at this point. If you don't see unified mode and it supports older than 15.3, we probably haven't got around to updating that cookbook yet and moving it to our common patterns, which is custom resources and this kind of things. And the reason why those are there is because we probably have about 70 that we need to come through the backlog. So if you see one of the cookbooks that doesn't support unified mode so far, come and give us a hand. We're always willing to see some pull requests on those things. But that's a really big change this year is supporting anything above 15.3. That's the one that supports unified mode. And you'll see a lot of people are confused about this because it's just the big license change in Chef 15, and it really moves our supported version a bit higher, which is nice. And supporting Chef 15.3 does mean that we get to do a bunch of really nice things that are baked into the Chef client. So actually for us, deprecating old versions of Chef means that we can do newer, cooler things and really make our cookbooks nicer to maintain and nicer to contribute to. And that's so great. It's like, what you've done on these things. Well, so in 2013, 2014 is when Sous Chef started off. We had lots of new cookbooks. We were adding new features. We were removing old features we didn't like. There was a lot of churn in those years, 2013, 2014. 2015, so you kind of stabilize at this point, and you see a sort of gradual removal of releases. And not really removal, but like our releases slowed down every year. At the end of 2020 is when we released this bot. And you'll suddenly see the uptick in releases. So myself and Jason believe in every single change requires a release. Even if it's a docs change, you say, well, I just want to see the docs for 7.11. Well, we've got to release each of these, even if it's a docs change or any of these things, we'll release them into the supermarket to get these out there. What this means is we've done a hell of a lot of releases this year. As of when we took the stats, which was less than 2 weeks ago now, we've done 300 plus pull requests. Pull requests and releases this year. One of those was a CI system change. So we did about 80 changes in one day. I apologize. We'll probably go on to that again in a second day. But that was a fun day for anyone who wasn't in the Sous Chefs announcement channel. The chef community Slack announcement channel. But yeah, you see there, we did a huge amount of releases, and none of that would be possible without the auto release system. Over to you, Jason.
How do we achieve these numbers? Because let's be honest, it all looks good, but how do I actually do it within my own place? So, Dan, if you can go to the next slide. Let's talk about why we needed automation here. So historically, how Sous have released is that members of the board have access to the keys to the kingdom to do the releases, which means that it's all great. Contributors can sort out all the pull requests, merge it all in, but then one of us is needed to go and do the merge. And we wanted to fix this. So we did a bit of sitting down, a bit of thinking about how we should approach this. And what's the first thing we think about? Oh, why don't we give everyone access to release? And then we go, I don't want to give everyone access keys to the kingdom. That's just bad security. So how can we enable them to release? So we started to investigate, and we ended up creating a bot system that runs off of GitHub webhooks. So when things emerge, when other GitHub events trigger, we automatically take actions, and those actions end up with a cookbook being released to supermarket every time a pull request is merged now. So historically, it was a bit more challenging because of us, but now we're no longer part of the process as the board. We just exist to do paperwork, and everybody who can merge can have their stuff released instantly or within 10 seconds. Anyone wants to try and time that, I'm happy for them to issue a lot of pull requests.
I tried really hard.
Do you want to go to the next one? Thank you. So what does the bot actually do? So the first thing we say is that our pull request and our release system works off of labels. And we now have a label for patch, for minor, and for major changes. We believe in Sembar. We hard code Sembar into our build system and CI, and you can't release without that label. It will fail a GitHub check. It's a required check. You can't merge with the required check failing, except if you're an admin. And as admins, we're not going to merge that. We also then go and look at changelogs. Changelogs should be human readable, so we go and check that they exist. As part of that, we're validating for an unreleased label, because we make it easy for you to know where we want you to put your change notes. And then when we release, we go and change that label to be the new version number through the release. And after the release, we'll go and set it back to unreleased for the next person so that they know where it goes. We're not asking contributors to have to remember to do these things. And the other one, as with all release systems, we want to own the version number. So we validate that you've not changed it on your pull request, because even we as admins are not changing it. It's owned by the automation and nobody else is touching it. Then if we talk about what happens, we've now got a pull request that has all the status checks passing, brilliant job. When we merge that in, that triggers a webhook that the bot will use to go and create a GitHub release. So that enables you to have a choice as to where you wish to subscribe to cookbooks releases. You can choose to look in announcements. You could also choose to go to Supermarket and subscribe to the cookbooks there, or you can choose to subscribe to GitHub releases. It's down to you and your preference as to where you want to look. But what that release does is it triggers another webhook, and that webhook uses the GitHub deployment API. This is an API I found not too many people are always aware of. So it's an API that allows you to pass a payload around a bit and move some stateful data around the system. So we use that API to create a deployment to the supermarket. That deployment allows us to pass that state through and not have to worry about having a database in the back end or anything stateful in our bot system. And finally, we upload to Supermarket. That's what the end goal here is, that released merge, or that release gets uploaded to Supermarket. And the thing that's not on here is after the upload to Supermarket, we drop a net message in announcements, or 80 of them, don't we, Dan?
It was a mistake. It was a mistake.
But yeah, as Dan said, we believe every release, every merge should be released. And we believe in Zenbar. So as long as you've got test passing, you've got a change log, and somebody set a label on it, then we'll merge it and it will get shipped straight away. And that speed has been really useful, I find. So if we talk about how do we manage all of these repositories and these cookbooks that are at scale, because having a release system is great, but if I need to keep everything in line with the standard, it becomes a bit painful. So the first thing that is something I really believe in is that there are no magic files in our CI system. So to me, consistency is key. As a developer, I want to load a repository locally and have the exact same experience locally as I would in the CI system. I don't want, so for example, we've got YAML lint. I don't want a magic YAML lint file that gets loaded into the CI system at runtime, and then I pass or fail on a test case that I can't reproduce locally. I want the same files everywhere. And we have a standard files repository, and that's the template for everything. What this allows us to do is to now have a conversation as an org as to what our standard is. We're not saying the files in there are perfect, but we're saying this is the convention, this is the consistency we're having today. And if we want to change that, let's change it org-wide. Let's not have a different convention for Apache compared to Java, compared to Kubernetes cookbook. They're all the same convention, but if somebody wants to change it, we'll have a conversation and we'll change it. We've done that with YAML lint, we've done it with various tools in there. And for us, it's just about making sure that everywhere is the same so that you as a developer can focus on the code and the logic rather than on having YAML lint passing or failing because it's doing something weird in the CI system. I'm sure we've all seen that one, Dan.
Yeah. You'll test something locally and you're like, well, or CI is doing something that you cannot replicate locally. That's one thing Jason and I are really, really adamant against is tests passing locally and then failing in CI because I don't know, like YAML lint's working differently, or you've got a different version of YAML lint or Markdown lint or something like that, or you're running different versions of the rules, or the rules are magically picked out of the air somewhere. And you're like, well, how do I replicate this locally? And hopefully the entirety of the Sous Chef's CI system is replicable locally, which is a really key part here. So we've got a standardized test suite to help these kinds of things. So Cookstyle lives in this section and the next section. It's not really a testing tool, but it does pick up a bunch of really nice linting. So this really it kind of belongs in the linters, but I really wanted to call this out first because this helps us enormously all over the board. So for integration tests, we use Inspec. That is probably my go-to tool for testing anything these days. Is Inspec. We test it using on machine configuration for all of our cookbooks, and that's really nice. We don't decide should we use BAPS, should we use Service Spec, should we use Inspec, should we use yet another tool I haven't thought of today. No, we just use Inspec. If it's not using Inspec in one of our cookbooks, we just haven't migrated it yet. And a lot of the time you'll find that Bats does a weird thing that doesn't actually work on Windows. You'll need something else. It turns out Inspect just works everywhere, and you can guarantee it will work everywhere. And it's really nice because that tool just is lovely and cross-platform. And we are testing it against macOS, Windows, and Linux in most places where we can. It's pretty nice. Chef Spec. So when we're running custom resources, or when we're writing custom resources, those will often have some helper methods and those kind of things. Chef Spec really stands out there in sort of exercising those methods. It's really, really quick. It's a bit like RSpec, but with a chef sort of DSL around it. So a DSL with a DSL around it. And it's very, very nice there. And Test Kitchen to manage all of the life cycle. Those tools shouldn't really come as a surprise to anyone in the Chef ecosystem. But over time, as an ecosystem, we've sort of migrated towards this. But you might still see some RSpec and some, Bats clicking around the place because the cookbook may have been designed 7 or 8 years ago. And again, so LintIt for linting, we've got the exact same story. We run Cookstyle, YAML lint, and Markdown lint. So Markdown lint for our Markdown, YAML lint for our YAML. These two things are really, really helpful for making sure you've written correct YAML. I don't want to go in there and say, well, why isn't my workflow running? Well, it turns out that your workflow isn't running because I've written the wrong YAML. That's where YAML will really help us write the correct YAML. It also makes it look correct. So if I've got a VS Code plugin that auto corrects my YAML, that's fine, but I need to make sure that auto correction matches the rules, the standards across the organization. We've actually found a couple of times recently that a Markdown parser or Markdown linter has said, actually, rather than stars, I want underscores everywhere. Well, that's not our standard and actually will break our standard Markdown linting. Both of these things are correct, technically correct. We've just picked one way of doing it rather than, so let's say you're reading the Markdown in a raw format, or what I know that bold does something. The 2 stars makes it bold. The two underscores make it bold. Well, you know what? I don't have to worry about that kind of things anymore. We just do stars everywhere. The same things with bulleted lists. There's 2 ways of doing that. Probably is more actually, but there's multiple ways of doing it. We've picked one of those. It doesn't really matter what you pick a lot of the time. It's just easier to pick one of these things and stick with the standard way of doing it. That means that the people reviewing the pull requests will be like, yep, that looks like valid Markdown, and also the Markdown lint passes, and all this makes sense. And secondly, your pull request only has to really worry about the content and the ideas and the content of it. Really, the content is the key here. Like, how do we get the content out quickly without having to worry about, like, I'm going to sit here and go, well, actually, could you write your Markdown like this? And that's me and Jess are probably going to say in a second. Like, we're not then worrying about putting our opinions on there. We then back the opinions of the group up. So the opinions of the group are codified into the linters.
I think I'll jump in there, Dan. Yeah, when I've been doing reviews, I've always felt a little cautious saying, oh, you're not following the consistency that we have, or the patterns, or this or that. I want tools to do this for me, because I never want to come across as that guy on the pull request too. Whenever you request them, they're going to say no because you've got a space wrong or something like that. Whereas by using tools, we've automated that process. And now it's a conversation about every single one of our tools puts in a status check. So our conversation is, all tests must be green to merge. And if the tests aren't working and you can't figure out why, reach out to us. We're happy to help. But at the same time, we're not going to be that guy going, oh, I think it should be stars. Somebody else saying, I think it should be dashes, and having these conversations. And really, as a reviewer, as Dan was saying, I want to focus on the logic that you're introducing to the cookbooks and to the code. I don't want to be worrying too much about style and consistency. I want tools to do that for me.
Yeah, I mean, all of these things sort of add up together into a kind of a sort of a release system. Well, we like to think of it as a release system anyway. And that release system runs on Kubernetes because, of course, everything these days runs on Kubernetes. And as a result, costs us a teeny bit of money to run. I say teeny bit of money. It's now money as of this month because DigitalOcean have given us some free credits to run sort of their cluster. We've just created a new cluster this morning, our time, isn't it? And that's really, really cool. So we've just started migrating away from sort of Jason's
personal cluster,
which is always really nice for them. Everyone's got access to that kind of stuff. And none of this would be really possible without our financial backers. So we've got I think there might be more than 10 individuals, but I think it's just picked the top 10 now, which is really, really nice. I've got a few like organizations we're really, really, really thankful for. So without any of those people and any of those organizations backing us, we wouldn't be able to run the Kubernetes cluster and fix and continuously fix these kind of things. And that's just for running the bot. One thing we also really like to do is say thank you to our contributors and say, oh, you've just made a huge contribution this year, and we'll send them out some swag or some Amazon vouchers, those kind of things. And like without any of these people, we wouldn't be able to do that. So massive, massive thank yous to these people. We really, really appreciate it. And so the key takeaways from this is automate as much as possible, and those fast releases will encourage people to contribute more. So let's say a person came on with a pull request and it looks fine and you merge it. Yeah, great. Well, it's in the main branch, but it's not in Supermarket. They can't use that code. What you really need to do is be able to fully ship that code. Great, you've hit the merge button, but until it's in a production release system, in our case Supermarket, no one can use it, so the value isn't realized. The sooner you can realize that value, people will contribute more and more frequently, which is really, really nice. And this goes for any aspect of software development, really, is get that value out there really, really quickly, and people will contribute more often and more regularly, which is really, really nice. And I think we've seen, actually, since we've done the release bot and we've been releasing regularly and trying to get, releases happen, we'll ship it. Even when it was doing manually, we were shipping them super, super quick. Occasionally, the problem was we would forget to ship that change, and people would come like a month later, be like, "Hey, yeah, that pull request you merged last month, can you do a release?" And we go, "Oh, I completely forgot about doing a release then." And it sat on 3 people's shoulders, and often it'd be 2 people's shoulders, and sometimes like 1 month it might be like we might all be out, or this doesn't rely on any of us being in. Any of the contributors who we trust could merge the pull request, and we can ship that code super, super quick.
And I think the key thing there is, by contributors we trust, we just mean people in the org. There's not different levels of contributors, really. There's the board who do paperwork, yay. And then there's everybody else who's part of the org who can approve and merge a pull request.
And those all rely on like tests passing. So if your test doesn't pass, that's where your value is if you write the correct tests. So sometimes you can't write perfect tests, but the closer you can get to these perfect tests, the closer you can get to like, yeah, I know it should fail in this scenario, or this shouldn't fail here. If you fail any of these tests, we can't merge it, so like fix it, and then that's your incentive to get it shipped, is we can't ship it until these tests pass, really. Even when it's transient failures, or let's say your pull request came in at a point where we suddenly bumped up a major version of Chef and we now rely on unified mode, for example, we need to go back and fix that and then rebase the pull request, which means that the cookbook is always the shippable state. So i.e. your code is always in the shippable state, even if it means submitting a pull request to fix the thing that's not in your pull request, because we shouldn't be shipping code that we can't use on the latest version of Chef, really. And as a result, I kind of mentioned unified mode a few times here, and major versions. So we really rely on unified. We rely on Semver. So it's major version change. We've broken something, we've deprecated something, we've removed something from the product. We'll do a major version change. We like to say major versions are free. We will ship them as often as we can, but we're not. That's really to highlight. We've probably broken something in your workflow there. Be careful. And then the minor version is we've probably added a feature. Hey, it's a really cool new thing you might want to see. And then patch is a bug fix, or usually a documentation fix for us, or a CI thing that you won't notice. It shouldn't affect the running of the cookbook, which is really, really nice. And the major version there, the key is like, what I would always recommend people do is pin to major versions, or maybe if you really, really want to be like cautious, pinning to minor versions, but never sourcing from the trunk. So major, main, or master. We've seen a few people do this in the last 6 months when we did a migration from main, so to main from master. We did that, and someone was pinning on a master branch. Those master branches don't exist, and you shouldn't rely on a branch being there, because we could just push a breaking change straight to that basically a development branch if you want to see that, and it could break your production. That's why you never want to just pull any version through, because we're trying to ship the latest version of the cookbook to ship the support latest version of Chef, and it's going to annoy somebody if you're shipping this frequently. And again, if you've got 150 artifacts that you're shipping on a daily basis, you're going to annoy somebody. It's going to be okay, but you're going to have a trouble with customers sometimes, and that's, I don't want to say that's okay, but it's kind of part and parcel of the course.
So I think here I would say that sometimes we release things, and if you're not pinning, you're going to get a breaking change and it may cause you a problem.
Yeah.
And from our perspective, we use versions as a way of allowing you to make a choice as to what you should be looking at. But we also, when we release a major version, we try very hard to give clear documentation. So if we take unified mode, for example, if you look in some of the changelogs, you'll see, oh, if I'm on Chef 15.3 or newer, it will just work. Okay, cool. So the tech debt here is literally just to move the pin up one level and run it through our test suite internally.
Yeah. Great.
But if I'm on Chef 14, it's a good thing I was pinning, because else that would have broken me. So to us, the changelog and the pinning is just, and the versioning is how we make sure that we don't upset our customers. But from time to time, things slip through. I know this year we released some cookbooks that haven't been released for a long time, and 1 or 2 were released by accident under the wrong levels, just because we didn't realize the changes in there, and we've had to pull 1 or 2 releases. I will say this: we're not perfect. Accidents do happen, unfortunately.
Yeah. Occasionally as well, we'll do upgrade notes. So if you're moving from, I think the Java cookbook has this, or the Apache cookbook. I think I did with the Apache cookbook when we did a major version change, or a major, or what we like to call a table flip. Look, we've changed all the stuff underneath you. Here's how you get from the previous major version that's changed into the existing one. How does that look? And you'll have sort of different resources and this kind of thing. So if you're using resource X, now you want to go use resource Y. It's a major version change, but this should help you sort of ease you into the new versions. We're trying to do that wherever possible. Sometimes we miss that. And a lot of times we'll probably be missing it because we want to also go and ship the other thing that we're like, really, we also want. So sometimes the documentation, as per most devs, documentation sort of lacks there. But if you notice anything that from a release perspective, it's actually, you haven't got a good release notes here, or you haven't got a good upgrading from version 6 to version 7. But I've done this, and I can now tell other people, we will love pull requests at that. Like, documentation pull requests are probably my favorite pull request, because if you found a way of doing something with the cookbook that no one else knows, then tell us, because there's some really interesting things. Or if you've ever noticed any errors with any of the cookbooks, so basically pull requests, documentations, all that kind of stuff is documentations. That's a new word, or docs. We love to see those. Talking about doing releases is our sort of final takeaway. We use Chef Exec Delivery Local All. So we used local delivery mode for running our things, running our CI system, rather than using Rake. We used Delivery Local, which is built into Chef. There was a breaking change that was made by a major version of that, and we decided then, like, right, well, this blocks all of our changes locally, so we can't test. We couldn't pull from a magic CI file, in fact, that was in another repository. We decided to fix this across all of our cookbooks in one day, because that meant that we could unblock all of our pull requests that are sort of waiting to sit behind it. So we did. I did. I think it was 90 changes in one day, or was it 100?
It was 160, because
was it actually 160? Oh,
it was around that number, because I think we made a couple that day. We were using the standard file system, so we made a change. had that pushed out to everything. And then we had all the pull requests sat waiting for someone to merge them. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, that was a long day of my email not working. So announcements got pinged on an almost regular basis, but sometimes you just need to make a change to unblock other changes. One change we're going to make to our release system is probably skip announce or something like that. Label our pull requests when we're going to redo the system. We're kind of in the middle of like doing a version 2 of the system. One thing is we want to really do is skip announcements, because sometimes you don't want to announce a CI change or a documentation change. It doesn't matter. People don't need to know this in the announcements channel of Slack. Just don't announce that. It's not an important change to anybody else. It's not made anyone's life any better. Just do skip announce. And in that case, we probably would have made less enemies that day. But hey, surprise, surprise, we now own almost every cookbook I can think of. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So how do you get involved in sous chefs? So we will take any pull request you can give it us as long as it passes the tests and isn't bad. So github.com/sous-chef to find us and all the cookbooks there. You'll probably, if you go to supermarket.chef.io, you'll probably see that we own a reasonable number of those cookbooks. If we don't own them and they're sort of unadopted, get in contact with us. We'll try and get in contact with the holder as well. We love adopting new cookbooks that have sort of not been loved over the years. And again, if you've got a personal cookbook that you quite like releasing on a regular basis and don't want to have to do the metadata version change and the change version change and all these kind of toil things, we'll also take those as well. We also would love you as a contributor into the organization. If you want to chat about any of those things, you can join us on Community Slack at hashtag sous-chef on the Community Slack there. The link is under there somewhere, probably here somewhere at the bottom. And that will get you to our sous chef room. And you can ask any questions. So we're probably the biggest user of custom resources. So that's another thing as well. So if you haven't used custom resources and you've got a ton of questions about custom resources, throw them our way. We've probably come across a number of interesting use cases. And yeah, we're pretty good at those. I can hear you, I can see you chomping at the bit to try and talk, Jason.
I'm trying to be quiet for once, but yeah.
Oh no, I don't believe that for a second. And then finally, if you want to throw some cash our way for our contributors and anyone who's opening pull requests, so I'm going to give Ben Hughes a massive shout out this year. We haven't sent him anything yet. We probably, as me and Jason have found out, we probably just need to go and pay for his electric bill. But we're probably going to send him some love this year because he's done a huge amount of big pull requests. And there's the kind of contributors we love to celebrate every year and say, hey, you've done a big number of pull requests. We'd love to send you some love back because they help everybody. It might be for their day job, but let's say John and I over two years ago, we rewrote the HA Proxy cookbook from scratch, and and it's in a really great place now. But that took I don't know, 3 major versions and get 40 or 50 pull requests. That took a lot of effort, and that was lovely. So we're seeing these kind of big pull requests and table flips over the next year. We love to celebrate those kind of people. So if you want to help us celebrate those people, drop up to Open Collective on the link there, and that will get us, allow us to celebrate those people, and also run our Kubernetes cluster because, and we're gonna say it, we like that thing is super helpful and allows us to race almost every day.
Yeah, I think as well, just in terms of shout outs, I'm definitely going to give one to Robert Detgens. So he's one of Lance's students, and he's been helping us to adopt so many things. I'll be honest, I don't know where he finds all the time from, and that's from me who basically lives open source anyway. But yeah, some really great people in our community. Every single one of you, we really appreciate. But yeah, come along, help out, send us money, join the community, ask questions. We're always here, always happy to help. And on the note of questions, has anyone got any?
I just stopped sharing and drop back in.
Who's got questions?
So I could probably talk about the bot and what it's written in, because I can't remember.
Yeah, so these two halves of the bots, there's the batch system and then there's the front end. So the front end's all written in Ruby, works off of webhooks. It is not Rails. I can't remember the framework I used off the top of my
Sinatra,
head.
isn't it?
Sinatra, yes. As that was just a simple API framework, and Rails apps are very large and complex for our use case. The back end is interesting. And anyone who knows me knows when I say interesting, it normally means crazy.
Yeah.
So the back end is written in PowerShell on Linux containers,
Oh,
because I can write PowerShell quickly and I have a Linux laptop. There wasn't much brain power being used that day, but
Yeah.
the big thing there is having stuff that automatically creates pull requests for us. So one of my favorite ones is Cookstar. So when Chef release a new version of Cookstar, every night we will try and run it. And if there's any differences, we will push them up and open a pull request, which means that as a contributor, you don't have to worry about that weird Cookstar rule on a cookbook that's not been released for a couple months just because there's been no pull requests on it. You're only focusing on your code, not on this magic.
And we're sort of in the process of rewriting that the front end cookbooks, the front end bot into like a proper GitHub app. So there's a framework for it written in JavaScript / TypeScript. And of course, I quite like TypeScript, so I'm rewriting in TypeScript. So I'll probably rewrite that. Hopefully we'll get it written, I'll finish within the next year. But it's
we need something for our talk next year.
Automation 2.0 is trying to use GitHub apps, which is really nice. It's been a really pleasant experience actually, of trying to rewrite I know what the system should look like. We've got a sort of an MVP. I don't really call the current system an MVP because it really works really well and it just releases in 10 seconds. It's insane. In fact, you said if the webhook takes longer than 10 seconds to come back, the whole thing just fails.
Yes,
So
this is something that I'll one day fix, but at the moment you have 10 seconds on a GitHub webhook to acknowledge it. And as I didn't want to deal with state and queues, I decided that meant I've got 10 seconds to finish actioning it, apart from on the deployment API, because that has a nice status API that goes with it. Although I think I'm still doing that in under 10 seconds, because why not? Set ambitious targets.
And so I've seen it a few times in the last month. We've now got a thing called auto merge on GitHub, where if I think, right, I've reviewed this pull request, but a test is still running, so I'll approve it, and then I'll click the auto merge button, and then I'll just disappear. I'll close the GitHub tab, and then I'll be in Slack, and I'll see a notification say we've released the Git cookbook or something like that, and you're like, oh, I approved that half an hour ago, and the tests have just finished. It's like. And that's kind of like the automation on the automation. Just like I've approved it, and then it's merged itself, and it's released itself, and it's all good. So it's pretty funny to see.
I cannot wait until GitHub have an API for that, so we can just Terraform it everywhere. Unfortunately, at the moment it's manual, but if anyone from GitHub is out there, please get an API on that, because I'm lazy.
Yeah, it's mostly like if I see it's not on there and I'm approving a pull request, I go and turn it on. Because I'm like, I'm not waiting for this. I've got better things to do. So.
I've got a question. Have you all ever had to had the challenge of dealing with a bad actor that it's a trusted that's a trusted contributor, and if so, how did you do it?
Not so far, but because our CI system's so enforced around pull request reviews, it would take a couple people to do it and for them to be invited into the org and various other steps. Yeah. But everything has to be reviewed. So even if you submit a malicious, I think we had some interesting ones at Hacktoberfest where people were just trying to bump up their numbers. Mm-hmm. And there we just looked at it and went, well, it's not getting past the review, close it, sorry. And that would probably be how we would treat it. It still needs to go through the CI system and pass everything. So it wouldn't be easy to do.
Okay. I think that's kind of like the most malicious we've seen is people trying to bump up their Hacktober numbers. And that was this year was interesting. I think there was a YouTube video or something on how to game the Hacktoberfest, and a lot of open source communities on GitHub saw the exact same behavior people just open a pull request that's like fixes a letter or something like that, or changes a letter in a pull request. Most people just be like, oh yeah, here's that, it's fine, whatever. But people are submitting 15 pull requests across our things, and we're like, just go away. And if you see one of those pull requests and then you see a person open like 15 other pull requests in October, we just tend to we see one of them and then close the rest of them, even if like one of them might have been helpful. Like at this point, you're just gaming the system, and we don't want to encourage that kind of behavior. But we do really, really like Hacktoberfest because it encourages people to get involved in open source. So as an idea, it was really, really good. This year, I think there was just a couple of bad actors in the community, open source community as a whole, and just encouraged just terrible behavior just for a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people were bored, they were quarantined, bored. That's what I was thinking. This past October. All right, well, we're coming up on October, so we'll see what's going on. People have lives again, sort
of. Fingers crossed.
Right.
But yeah. Okay.
Any additional questions or
got any
additional things to add, Dan or Jason?
I guess one, Dan. What do you think is the most interesting cookbook rewrite we've done in the past few years? Your personal favourite?
I think it might be HA Proxy. It just keeps getting better and better and better. Like we rewrote HA Proxy with an API in mind. Oh, I don't know. Is either HA Proxy or Apache? So HA Proxy has kind of been rewritten a few times, and the API for it just keeps getting better, and the way the internals work, there's some really, really cool stuff there. Again, Ben did that this year, so we've got the accumulator pattern, and then using that always boggles my mind. But it's got some really interesting helpers there. I use that as a reference cookbook for most things. My personal sort of rewrite of Apache 2, I really like the method I did there of stubbing out all of the methods for the helpers first of all, and then using Chef Spec to run through that. And then it says, and again, that's a reference cookbook I use for relearning Chef Spec every time I need to go relearn it. So it's really cool there. So most kind of like those two, Apache or HA Proxy. Have you got one at all?
I'd say for me it's Keep Live D. So
really?
While that wasn't such an amazing one, it was taking something that was the old heavyweight resource providers, those undocumented things that people generally shouldn't be using based on what I understand Chef's recommendation, and moving it into custom resources, into accumulator pattern, and making it so that people can start contributing to it. Because I remember when I first looked at that cookbook, I just went, what is going on? This is scary, no thank you. And now I see people contributing in there. And it's clearly that's the win for me, is enabling other people to join in. Because I'm sure everybody out there has code in their organizations that they're not actually organization specific, they're just code to help them do something.
Yeah.
And these are the things that I find by us fixing our cookbooks, we enable them to open source. And if you are an organization out there with stuff that you think could be open source, put it this way: if you send it to us, we do the maintenance for you and you don't have to worry. So you've got something that always works and you've helped the community. And in a lot of these use cases, it's like some of the Windows resources I've contributed over time. They're not really going to give me a business advantage. They're just going to enable other people to then build on top of them.
Yeah. I guess the Apache cookbook is a good. Actually, any of our cookbooks that we regularly maintain is like being able to deploy HA Proxy in a consistent manner isn't a business advantage. How you use HA Proxy and how you configure it and make your requests really, really fast. Like there's what your magic source is. Like how you configure it and use those cookbooks is your magic source, and that's where your competitive advantage kind of can be. But the fact that you deploy it in the first place, that really isn't. And that's the thing that can be open sourced is your work. And open sourcing all of the stuff that I've done just makes it easier for other people to contribute. But like, hey Dan, you've actually written this badly. Like, yeah, do that. But it's always nice to be like have some feedback on those kind of things. So yeah. I think I might just finish there maybe, because we could talk about sous chefs all day long.
Right.
I think me and Jason do probably. So
talking is not something that we struggle with.
Awesome. Well, thank you for giving us a rundown of what the sous chefs have been up to. I think you guys should definitely come up with like some type of
Oh, yeah.
call. Yeah, that's the next step. Thank you, all of our studio audience who joined. Thank you. A special thank you to Dan and Jason for this wonderful talk and making sure that we are up to date with all of the sous chef happenings. And thank you to the audience out there listening or watching this video for Chef Conf 2021 online. Enjoy the rest of the show, and we'll see you later.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you for having us.